America is headed towards the midterms this November, and as such, we have a lot to be thankful for, but a lot to yet anticipate and even fight for as a nation. Because President Donald Trump is in the office, we've seen a lot of wins in favor of religious freedom, national sovereignty, national security, energy independence. There's a lot to be grateful for, and a lot that we can actually anticipate in terms of victories in the future based upon his past performance. But a lot of people leading up to midterms might think, well, he's not on the ballot, so why should I actually get out and vote? Well, on November 3rd, you should get out and vote because his policies are still on the ballot and he still has 2 years in the White House. And we need a Congress to be favorable towards righteous causes, righteous policies. Joining me today is a man who, you look at the breadth of the work of a person's life and you recognize God's anointing upon it. And that man is with us today, Father Frank Pavone, yet again for this March to midterms. First and foremost, thank you for joining us. This isn't the regular setup for you. So where are you joining us from?
I am on Merritt Island at the office of our executive director.
Ah, very good.
I was here today for some administrative meetings. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I wanted to discuss President Trump's approval ratings. Obviously, after the State of the Union, it came out that he, even though he's in his second term, has the highest approval ratings, obviously, in his party, for any party at this stage in the game. Obama never achieved this level or the status of approval, nor did President Bush. And for how much pushback that we're even seeing, not just from the left, but also on the right of the political spectrum, I found it very interesting that for how contested his policies, his ideas, his stances are, that he's actually gained this much approval. So leading into midterms, why do you think that is, that he's garnered that much support at this stage?
Well, because the American people are smart. You know, I mean, obviously a lot of people are easily deceived and whatnot. But, you know, as time goes on, the wisdom of President Trump becomes more and more obvious. I noticed recently, you know, even some folks who have been, you know, in the anti-Trump camp among the mainstream Republicans have started to say, you know, maybe I misjudged him. And this is going to happen as time goes on because people will see the results. They're going to see the results in the economy. They're seeing the results, even with something like the Iran intervention. You know, it's amazing how quickly people jump to conclusions or they stoke fears. Or I think of it as traumatic reaction. You know, when you've had a trauma in the past and something happens that's similar to it, you have to be careful to react to what's happening now and not to react to what was happening before, and it's embedded in your psyche. And I think that for a lot of Americans, you know, the whole Iraq situation back over 20 years ago now was in some ways can be portrayed as traumatic. And they're reacting to the facts from the past, not to the facts of the present. But as time goes on, I think in a matter of weeks, people will see that, wait a minute, this is not Iraq. This is not the Bush presidency. This is not what happened before. That to say that overall, as a principle, the more time goes by, the more people realize President Trump was right about so many things, in fact, right about everything. And that's why not only have the approval ratings been so strong, I think we're going to see them continue to increase.
Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough, what you said about the trauma element, because on that issue of Iran, I've seen almost like a divide, but it seems like the divide is very small on one side, and there's a lot more people, especially in the Republican Party, I believe it was 86% I just saw today, who are actually in favor of the intervention on that issue. Yes. And it's refreshing to hear someone in ministry actually have this kind of an answer that you just presented. I am very grateful for what President Trump is doing. I've helped people come over from that nation into the North American realm, and they're so grateful because we are a city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan once dubbed America, and we have to actually enforce the freedoms that we have for the sake of other people. So I'm very grateful for what he's doing, and to hear your response is just brilliant on that. You also talked about results. And I wanted to ask you if you would highlight, there's so many things that we could say on Trump's record, but we've seen
Yeah.
a lot of wins in the last 2 years of him being in office. But based upon the past, we can actually kind of predict the future trajectory of future wins. So could you highlight for everybody a couple, or as many as you like, really, of the wins that we've seen that we can actually thank God for, because we need to get to the polls, but we need to remember what God's done through this president.
Well, he has been a peacemaker. He has ended multiple conflicts, multiple wars. I think it's up to 8 or 9 now, and there's going to be more. He has secured the border, of course, which is a key thing top of mind for so many voters. And just by doing that, he has helped to bring the crime rate, like the murder rate is lower than it has been since the 1900, and other statistics in regard to crime in the United States have likewise gone down. And it's not hard to figure out why. Most crimes are committed by a very small percentage of the people. I mean, you could ask, well, let's ask our audience. I mean, how many murderers do you know? I mean, most people don't know any, and yet, well, where are all these murders coming from? Well, they're coming from a very small percentage of people. And it stands to reason, it's common sense. And again, we're talking about a president who believes in common sense governance, that if you keep the murderers out of the country in the first place and you kick out of the country the ones that are already here, guess what's going to happen to the murder rate? It's going to go down. So we see crime at all-time lows. We see the economy improving incredibly. Now, people might not yet feel that in their pocketbooks or their bank accounts, but they will, because the statistics, you talk to the economic experts and you look at your real wages increase, GDP numbers. I mean, not everybody understands all these statistics and whatnot, but the bottom line is, you ask an economic expert to just translate into plain English, and they'll tell you things are better than ever, and it is going to translate into the felt experience of people relatively soon, if it isn't already. So we've got that accomplishment. Now, on the front of freedom, right now, up to now, okay, so we're talking about basic security and safety, not only in America, but in the world. But then think about freedom. I've been going to the meetings of the Religious Liberty Commission that President Trump established and put under the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick of Texas. And this committee is great. It is putting together concrete recommendations for the president to further increase religious freedom, even though he's already done more than any other president has done. And we are freer in America to express our faith publicly than we ever have been before, including in the workplace, on social media, even in the political realm, even in the churches. He has helped the churches. As a member of the clergy myself, President Trump back in 2017, right at the beginning of his first term, said, clergy, we need you to speak your mind, even in regard to politics. So we're not going to punish churches for speaking out about politics. Once he does that, which he did, then it's up to the churches to pick up the ball and run with it. And some will, others will stay trapped in cowardice. But he's even expanded the freedom of speech in the pulpit. What has he done with censorship? He has crushed it. And social media, of course, obviously with the courageous actions of people like Elon Musk and others, but at the instigation of President Trump, we are out of that era of social media censorship that we lived through, especially during the COVID year or years. And even in the mainstream media, what has happened now, his successful lawsuits, what has happened with CBS, and he got them to agree to, when there was that whole debacle with 60 Minutes and the edited interview of Kamala Harris, right? He won on that front, where they had to agree now to release the full transcripts of any of these kinds of interviews of presidential candidates. But even beyond that, we see a shift taking place now, and a lot of these media outlets coming under new leadership that is more objective. these are big things. What he's been doing with universities. He got a number of secular universities into line in terms of the bias that they show. And in terms of like the transgender, what was it in Pennsylvania, taking the awards away from, women and giving them to men who are pretending to be women. But he got was it the University of Pennsylvania to reverse that, apologize to the real women and give them the honor that was due to them. So we see, and then recently, like the president took us out of like 66 different international organizations, many of which, of course, very well on the international scene are promoters of abortion, funders of abortion, funders of all kinds of other left-wing ideologies. We can ask ourselves, where is all this insanity coming from and the degradation of morals in the family? Well, a lot of it comes from these entities that people would never know the names of, and a lot of them you can't understand the names of them even when you do know them. And it's why are we involved in these entities? So he looked at this and he asked the question he always asks: what's in the best interests of the American people, and what best lines up with American values and identity? And if the answer is it doesn't, well, then we're out of it. And this is big. And again, the implications of this don't unfold all in one day. We will see the fruits of this even more as time goes on. Government regulations, people are free to start their businesses and let their businesses flourish with fewer regulations that would burden them so much that they can't make their businesses grow. The one big beautiful bill. I mean, what's in there is incredible. We didn't even have time to list all of those. And for example, it has the biggest funding ever for school choice. So parental rights. I want to educate my child the way I feel is best because I, as a parent, know best what's best for my child. And the president has been facilitating that and bringing victory after victory on that front. On and on it can go. But those are some of the things that come to mind most immediately.
Yeah, we could literally talk about it on and on and on because
all day. Yeah.
All day. Like there's just so many things that we can be grateful for and that directly impact every single family in this nation. Right. And that's where I'm looking at all of this and I'm going, wow, we have so much to be thankful for, but we have to actually fight to maintain it. And the fight for freedom, if you actually want to maintain freedom, you have to fight for support. You have to actually exercise the freedoms that are protected by the government, that are given to us by God. And
well, Matea, and I mean, the question is so good that you just asked me, because I want to encourage our listeners and our viewers that, first of all, go to the whitehouse.gov website. You could see listings of the accomplishments. And memorize at least a few of them so that when you're in conversation and people say, oh, wow, how can you support Trump? Say, well, here's why. And name just 2 or 3 of the main accomplishments. And then ask the person who is anti-Trump. Of course, I mean, I don't know if we found a cure yet for Trump derangement syndrome, so this might not work. But one of the things people could at least try is to say, okay, he secured the border and he's taking dangerous gangs out of our neighborhoods and sending them back to their own countries. What's your objection to that exactly? Mention a good thing and then ask the person, do you have an objection to that? I mean, if so, just tell me what it is. I'll respect your opinion, but I don't understand how you can see that as a negative. And then, and people say, how terrible he is, and say, okay, so I'll tell you some of the accomplishments about that I like, but tell me the things that he's actually done that, promote racism or whatever you think he's a dictator or whatever. I mean, what are you talking about? Because so much of this back and forth isn't based on any facts at all.
Yeah. And that's something interesting that I recently saw, I believe it was just yesterday, that 53 Democrats came out in Congress against a non-binding resolution. So it means something, but it doesn't mean everything. It's not lots, but it was a non-binding resolution on affirming that Iran, under its current leadership anyway, is actually the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism globally. And
Okay.
we saw some Democrats come and say, yes, we agree with this. But then
Yeah.
there was these 53 who voted no, we don't agree with this, just because President Trump is in the White House and just because there's actions being taken under this now conservative leadership, as opposed to just a couple years ago. Every Democrat, minus one, actually agreed with this affirmation about
This is
Iran.
what they've done. They've boxed themselves in to a position where if everything that Trump does, I have to oppose, then they put themselves in a position where they're going to have to oppose things that they themselves actually do agree with and did agree with publicly in the past. But then what that does is it makes them more and more disconnected and unappealing to the vast numbers of Americans who see President Trump's actions as being common sense. So they're putting themselves into a morally, logically, and even politically untenable situation. And this is why we say, Trump derangement syndrome, this is an actual problem. It's not just, we're hyperventilating or whatever, but it really is a condition. And boxing yourself in where you have to automatically oppose everything he supports is suicidal politically. And he plays it perfectly. The State of the Union. He is a master. Well, what he does is the Democrats take these untenable positions. They oppose everything he does simply because he's the one supporting it. So then he says, all right, I'm going to use that against them. And then he asks them publicly, the question, is the first duty of American government to protect American citizens rather than illegal aliens? Stand up if you agree. He knew exactly what he was doing. And they didn't stand up, and they showed themselves to be who they really are. And that's why, by the way, some of the Democrats boycotted the speech. Like, why can't you show up? Well, because they knew that he was going to do things like that. And they don't want to themselves be having to answer to their constituents back home. How come you didn't stand for something as simple as that? Because they know how he puts them in their place. So we're really witnessing some amazing political leadership here.
No kidding. And I often think about, for example, I was thinking right before you brought up the State of the Union, I was thinking, man, we need to talk about the State of the Union. There was something so interesting as I was watching that. And of course, he's just a master, as you said, kind of forcing their hand in certain ways. But I'm almost sad that there's not any kind of rebuttal that is based upon any foundation anymore. It's just
no foundation.
Because I actually really appreciated years ago watching video clips of old Democrats, talking points from old Democrats, old leftists who are nowhere near the extremes that they are today. But those things actually challenged me to be fortified in what I really believed as a conservative, what I really believed, whether even spiritually, listening to atheists, listening to people who are opposed to the creation account. What is it that I actually really believe? And I miss that for this generation of young people who are just told, here's some talking points that are of the far, far left extreme, and this is what you should really believe in. I kind of agree with that for this generation because they're not exposed to any kind of foundational opposition. But at the same time, we have a doorway, an opening as conservatives, as believers, to really take a hold of truth and push it farther and faster. And that's something I like about what this second term of President Trump has produced. I think he learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that he and his team really learned from the first administration that
for sure,
we have to actually run this thing way faster. And that's what Biden did. Biden came in and he just, everything that Trump did in the first term, just try to eradicate. So I'm really appreciative of that. And with that being said, do you think going forward, let's say we win the House in the Congress in this next midterm, do you think that same energy is going to carry on? And if so, what might you anticipate in terms of policy changes or improvements?
Yeah, I think it is going to. First of all, I think we are going to do well in the midterms. Now, not everyone is of that opinion, but I really do think that just like his 2024 comeback was such an unlikely occurrence, to say the least, such a surprising occurrence, something that, I mean, who would have imagined it? And yet some were predicting that. Dick Morris, in particular, wrote a whole book about it called The Return, and he was right. That same Dick Morris has said the same thing now about the midterms, that he says, listen, we're going to keep the House, we're going to keep the Senate. And despite all the odds against us, and, obviously the political history of America suggests otherwise, but, for a number of reasons, some of which we already talked about, the changes people are going to feel in the economy, what they're going to see is a successful intervention in Iran, just give it a few more weeks. There's a lot of things that are going to happen to give us a real big advantage for the midterms. So what would happen next? Certainly they're going to keep their feet on the gas, and certainly there's going to be a lot of great progress. Now, I think in terms of what policy measures, it's going to keep going in the same direction, supercharging the economy, continuing to build world peace and alliances, fair trade agreements, better and better, fewer and fewer government regulations, better and better tax situations, and I think more and more freedom. I mean, there's still more work to be done. Like I said about the Religious Liberty Commission, he's still looking for concrete actions that can be taken. And some of these recommendations are going to be legislative recommendations. I talked, for example, about the freedom he has given to clergy in the pulpit. Well, he's done that by executive action, and he mentioned this at the National Prayer Breakfast the other day, that, okay, now we have to get it out of the law itself. We're talking about the Johnson Amendment in the tax code. Well, Congress has to act in order to do this. And he turned to Mike Johnson at the prayer breakfast and said, yeah, Mike, we got to get rid of this thing altogether. So I would be expecting more and more of his executive orders to be translated into legislation. Now, of course, the big problem, and I would hope to see this if after the midterms, if we've got the House and the Senate, so much good legislation, including translating these executive orders into laws, is stopped because of the filibuster. I would really hope, it would really do so much good for America if the Senate would just get rid of that filibuster, or if not getting rid of it altogether, require that it be a talking filibuster. And I presume our audience is familiar with the distinction that we're making. But I mean, the filibuster gives the minority certain very important rights. And basically it boils down to, hey, listen, we want to continue debating this because maybe we think there are certain ideas that have to be brought forth that might persuade both the public and also some of our colleagues who have to vote on this to change their vote, right? So you want to keep debating? Okay, but if you want to keep debating, that should be because you have something to say. Yeah. And what's happening now with the filibuster is that, okay, instead of letting the majority act like the majority, you have to have a supermajority of 60 votes. And meanwhile, you don't have to do anything in the meantime. Well, wait a minute. This is supposed to be the 60 vote threshold is a cloture vote. In other words, you're saying, okay, we finished debating. Now let's have the vote, right? Yeah. But what they're doing is they're saying we're not finished debating, but then they're not debating. Right. So enforce the filibuster as an actual closure of debate, not just as a way for the minority to stop the majority. I mean, I think at least that is incumbent on us now at this point to change. And I would hope after a successful midterm that we would see that, if not before, and because the most important piece of legislation, as you well know, is the Save America Act. And speaking in terms of policy, I mean, I want to see that passed before the midterms. But, of course, again, the Senate, it's an uphill climb. But we're sending out action alerts, from our organization constantly sends out action alerts of this type, saying, and we've done several now on the Save America Act. And it's like, come on, guys, secure our elections. We know most people support this. It's not even controversial. So let's get it done.
Yeah, it's incredibly there's a lot of bipartisan support on that one. That's what's
There is.
frustrating. It's like
Yeah.
where have Democrats gone wrong on this one? Like
Well,
how could you go wrong on this one?
yeah,
Really?
exactly. There's only one logical explanation, and the president has said it publicly many times, as many others have, myself included, is that the only reason you'd be opposed to this is that you want to cheat. And
Yep.
you know, it's sad that we would be accusing people of that, but there's all kinds of evidence that is not speculative. And what other motive could there be? I mean, you don't want people to, when they register to vote, you don't want them to prove that they're citizens. And when they actually vote, you don't want them to prove who they are. Well,
Yeah.
why not? So they want to cheat, and that's what's gone wrong with some of them anyway. And those that want to cheat should be out of power altogether.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Now, on the subject of cheating, I'm glad you brought that up because Texas just went through something very interesting. We saw a lot of Republicans lose their seats as well, or positions rather, but as well as Democrats come in. And James Tallarico is someone that I want to fixate on. He is now the new Democrat senatorial candidate in Texas, and he beat out Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine Crockett is saying that there was election interference and all this stuff, and she was cheated out of her position. But James Tallarico is now in play. He is attended, I believe, is Austin Seminary, theological seminary. I believe that's where he's currently studying. But he has come out as this very bold, so-called progressive Christian, and he's running under the Democrat banner. I believe his first sermon that he ever gave was on the defense of abortion. How is it possible that the Democrats have gotten to this place? And what is it that conservatives in Texas can do come midterms to defeat Tallarico in that state?
Well, this is a hijacking of religion. Hillary Clinton many years ago, in speaking with international women's groups that were pro-abortion, said that the last obstacle in their way is religion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can't get rid of religion, but you can end up hijacking it. And this is what, for example, there's an organization called the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, rcrc.org. And Tallarico has a lot of their talking points, because they will say scripture justifies abortion. They'll have liturgies and blessings for people getting abortions. They justify it in every which way. I think what conservatives in Texas need to do, obviously within the religious realm, foster some good preaching and teaching, because solid preaching and teaching will inoculate the members of the congregation who are also voters against these ridiculous arguments, but also make the case that, hey, listen, Tallarico, we're not electing a pastor. You want to be talking this way. You want to be go drop out of the race and go lead a church somewhere. There's plenty of progressive churches that'll welcome you as their pastor. But if you're going to talk public policy, then make a policy argument. Now, obviously, everyone is free to express their faith, as we were saying before, but express it as your faith. If you want a policy position, well, then give us policy reasons, give us constitutional reasons. If you're going to oppose a policy, give us the rationale as a person who is exercising governance, not simply, you can express and should express your faith in public, but you shouldn't substitute constitutional and legal reasoning, legislative reasoning with scripture quotes.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, on that subject, then, he's obviously incredibly anti-family, anti-life, blatantly. What would you like to see in future for the country, or even on a state level, if you'd like to take it that direction, in terms of a pro-family policy come in the next 2 to 5 years, if you could just, you had that executive pen and you got to say, I want this policy, what would that be?
Yeah. Well, earlier we were talking about the accomplishments of President Trump. And obviously, for someone like me as a pro-life leader, the biggest thing we've been rejoicing in is the reversal of Roe v. Wade. And what the reversal of Roe v. Wade has done now is open the door for states to, and also for the federal government, to give as much protection to the unborn as we want to give them. It didn't grant that protection. It opened the door to that protection. So now that's what we want to see. We want to see more protection for the unborn. We want to see more help for families. And the president and the vice president had the whole administration have focused on this also already very strongly. Let's do everything we can to help parents have children and to not let it be such an oppressive burden. So in other words, another one of those great Trump accomplishments, the Trump funds for the children, these private investment funds that every child can have now that is seeded with $1,000, and the employers of their parents can feed into it too, and these children are going to have, by the time they're 18, a lot of money in their bank account. So these are amazing things that are happening. So I would encourage policies like this on the state level as well, that really make it more attractive for families to have more children. There's a lot of reform that's needed with adoption laws. Again, make it easier, make it less expensive, make it less burdensome to do the right thing. What we also can see, specifically in the area that I work, we have got to, first of all, get rid of these extreme amendments. Some states have really marred and twisted their constitutions to have this fake right to abortion imposed on it. No, we've got to get rid of that, and there's action that can be taken to get rid of that. If a citizen's, of course, it works differently in each state, but if a citizen's ballot measure has put unlimited abortion into the Constitution, there can be one to take it out, and they're doing this in Missouri this year to undo the amendment that was put into their constitution. So I would encourage other states to do the same, obviously according to their own state laws. Continue to work for election integrity on the state level, but specifically in terms of family things, the school choice issue. Again, we already said on the federal level with the big beautiful bill. Now the big beautiful law, there's more support for school choice than we've ever seen. But the states too can come alongside that with their own policies and get rid of harmful things in the curricula as well. DEI we have it on the run, and the woke agenda, we have it on the run, but it's not fully eradicated, and it can come back if these elections go the wrong way. So I would want to see that as well.
That's brilliant. Well, the next 2 years after we win the midterms, in Jesus' name, we need to put a big old bow and make some things very permanent in law. And that's what I'm hoping. And that's something that I think people get frustrated over, is after an election, things start to change, and then things just change all over again with another opposing administration coming in, and it's time to make some things permanent in America and permanent. And that goes back,
Matea, to the filibuster. I wrote another article about this recently, that one of the many arguments right now for changing the practice of the filibuster is that unless we do, I think it demotivates voters. Now, that doesn't mean they're even thinking about the filibuster. Many American citizens aren't even aware of it. But here's what they're aware of. They work like crazy for the elections. They win elections. They realize, now we have control of Congress. Now we have the majorities in the House and in the Senate. Okay. They understand this on a very basic level. And then they don't see the results in legislation. And they conclude, what do they conclude? Oh, they're lazy. They're not honest. They're not doing their jobs. They just wanted to get into power. They're not doing what they promised to do. But that's not necessarily the case at all. We know that there are members of Congress that it's true to say that, unfortunately. Some of them are lazy. Some of them are, just unfaithful to the commitments that they made. But in most cases, they do want to do what they promised to do.
Yeah.
But they're one person. They can't overcome the filibuster by themselves. If they're in the majority, that doesn't mean they have a supermajority. And so because of a procedural thing that is operating outside the radar of many citizens, they get demotivated because then they ask the question, well, then what did winning this election gain me? I don't see it. I don't see the gains when it comes to new laws that would enact policies that I thought I was voting for in the election. So that this ties into what you're saying.
Wow. I'm going to have to go and read that article. I'm very interested, very intrigued. This is something that, coming from a past in politics in another country, to understand the filibuster in this country is just fascinating, and how it's utilized or
I put it on Breitbart published it. Breitbart News published it.
Okay. We'll put that in the comment section for everyone to go and get educated, myself included. Well, that's our time for today, but I could keep going on. It's always so refreshing talking with you, and I thank you for giving of your time and for setting your hand to the plow and giving so much to the people of America. It's an honor to spend time with you, sir.
And I can say the same to you. Thanks for the great work, and thanks for this opportunity.
The Bible warns about deception in the last days, but what if one of the great deceptions is what you believe or don't believe about the rapture of the church? I dive into that and much more in my latest book, They Lied to You About the Rapture. Get your